We're going to continue with the grammar in Lección 6, and we're going to look at indirect object pronouns. So in Lección 5, you learned that a direct object pronoun receives the action of the verb directly. So in contrast, an indirect object gets the action of the verb indirectly. So here we have the subject Roberto, and then I have an indirect object pronoun, which would be lei, which would go with my indirect object a Luisa. So if I had a verb presta, my direct object would be lends what? 100 pesos. Then to whom would be a Luisa. So we're kind of breaking down and diagramming this sentence. An indirect object is a noun or pronoun that answers the question to whom or for whom the action is being done. So if we're looking at Roberto lends 100 pesos, well, who? To who? That's why a Luisa would be the indirect object pronoun. If I'm looking at the other example, a quien le presta Roberto 100 pesos, I'm saying to whom does Roberto lend 100 pesos? So I'm asking that question actively in Spanish and not just pointing out the indirect object. The forms of the indirect object pronouns for the first and second person are the same as the direct object pronouns. So this is where context is incredibly important as you work in Portales and you translate things. You've got to make sure that you understand the meaning and context of the sentence so that you're aware of if it's a direct or an indirect object pronoun so that you can form your sentence appropriately. Indirect object pronouns are going to agree in number with the corresponding noun, but not with gender. And this is why I have lei, which is going to be for him or her. So there's no gender assignment given with indirect object pronouns. So if I'm looking at this, I have some example of my indirect object pronoun. I've got bueno, le doy un descuento, where lei is being used as the indirect object pronoun. Now, when you're breaking this down to translate this, then you want to keep in mind, is lei going to be a direct or an indirect object pronoun? Well, then let's look at the verb. Le doy un descuento. So to whom are we doing the doy un descuento? To them. So, or to him/her. So that's why lei is being used in the singular form. So again, when you're looking at this, make sure that you're recognizing what is the verb and then to whom is the verb being done to, and that's going to help you identify what's happening there. When I use an indirect object pronoun, Spanish speakers commonly use both an indirect object pronoun and the noun to which it refers in the same sentence. This makes for some fun with translating things in Portales. This is done to emphasize and clarify to whom the pronoun refers. So if I say, ella le vende la ropa a Elena, it's asking us, she returned the clothes to Elena. Well, to Elena is an indirect object pronoun. And so we're going to add the lei in there because it's to whom is she returning. And even though the lei is there, it doesn't necessarily replace the a Elena. So sometimes this can be thought of as somewhat redundant, but really it's just being extra clear that, hey, to whom Elena is going to be an indirect object pronoun. If I'm also using indirect object pronouns, they're used without the indirect object noun when the person for whom the action is being done is known. So if I look at Anna lends her skirt to Elena, she also lends her a pair of jeans. When these two sentences are combined, it's going to be implied when she also lends her a pair of jeans that that's also going to Elena. So when we have sentences that are following each other in a paragraph, it's common to drop off the use of a Elena or the actual noun for who it's being done to because we're assuming that you're following the sequencing of what's happening in the paragraph. Indirect object pronouns are usually placed before the conjugated form of the verb. In negative sentences, then the pronoun is placed between no and the conjugated verb. So we look at both examples here. You'll see that the pronoun is coming before the conjugation or between the negative and the conjugated verb. When a conjugated verb is followed by an infinitive or the present progressive, we have an exception to where that indirect object gets placed. The indirect object pronoun can then be placed before the conjugated verb or attached to the infinitive or present participle. I would say there's kind of an even split there. My preference when I am speaking in Spanish is that I attach it to the infinitive form of the verb. That's just my preference, and that's how I grew up learning to speak Spanish. However, different geographical locations or cultures within Spanish are going to have their own preference, and neither is right or wrong. It's just a matter of preference. When an indirect object, though, is attached to the present participle, we do add an accent mark to maintain the proper stress. So because the indirect object pronouns le and les have multiple meanings, Spanish speakers will often clarify to whom those pronouns refer to by utilizing a preposition plus the pronoun or a preposition plus the noun. Because le could stand for a girl, a boy, for a you. So there's a lot of different ways that we can indicate and clarify things. So especially when we use le and les, we tend to add the actual a pronoun or a noun in to really be clear on, well, what's the gender of the person? Is it Juan? Is it Juanita? What is it you? Is it a formal? Is it an informal? Is it a they? So that's kind of when we're being very picky on what we do in conjunction with that. The irregular forms dar, to give, and decir, to say, are often used with indirect pronouns, which should make sense because if you say, I gave her something, well, to whom did you give it? Her. So by nature, the action of these verbs is resulting in a person being involved, and that's why these verbs in particular are going to be used with an indirect object pronoun. And here are some examples. If I say, me dan una fiesta cada año, they throw me a party every year. They throw who? Me. If you say, voy a darle consejos, I'm going to give her advice. Te digo la verdad, I'm telling you the truth. Or, no les digo mentiras a mis padres. I don't tell lies to whom? To my parents. So these are some valuable nuances to be aware of as you work in Portales this week.